In this tutorial in CyberLink PowerDirector for Mac, we're going to look at the fundamentals of working with transitions. These tips apply to Windows users as well. Transitions can be used in 5 different circumstances. We have, for example, on the screen here some graphic images, some still images, and if I put 2 of them on the screen at a time, I can actually use a transition to go from one to the other. Here we don't have any, and sometimes that's just what you want. We can also use them obviously between video clips. So if I have 2 clips of skateboarding and I want to apply a transition, we'll do that in a few moments. There are 3 other occasions when you can use transitions you may not be aware of. You can use transitions between audio clips, and you can also use transitions between titles, and you can use transitions with pip objects. We'll just focus on video for this tutorial. Now, how do you use transitions in CyberLink PowerDirector? Let me give you a couple of philosophical tips. First of all, sometimes you don't need to use them at all. Just because you have a gap between 2 scenes doesn't mean you need a different transition. Sometimes just that pop that you saw on the screen a moment ago from one scene to another is all you see in professional video. That's adequate. So don't use them unless you really have a purpose for them between different clips of one kind or another. But when you need to use them, how do you do that? Well, let's look at some fundamentals. First of all, I need to go to my transitions room. It's the 3rd icon down on the left. I can press the F8 key to get there. And here I have a ton of transitions. And I've loaded the default package plus the Content Essentials package, and I have 142 transitions. My first piece of advice is avoid 99% of them if you want the story not to be interrupted by the transitions. Sometimes the transitions are so interesting and fascinating that they take the mind of the viewer away from the story, the narrative that you're trying to tell. Now, some of these in certain circumstances will work just perfectly, but there's a handful of basics that most professional editors focus on, so you don't need 2,000 transitions to tell your story. I'm going to go to the simple general category because here are the ones that are most commonly used. The most commons are fade and blur, sometimes cross or slide. We'll focus on how to use any of them. To use a transition, you simply take it, we'll take the shove one, and hold the left mouse down and drag and drop it between 2 clips. Now here I have it in the middle. If I hover over it, I see this is 2 seconds long. And it has not changed the duration of the clips or anything to the right. But sometimes that will happen. Let me delete that. And I'm going to change a preference that you need to know about. I'm going to click on the gear in the upper right corner and click on the editing option. And the first one is the default transition behavior. It's set right now to cross. That's my favorite. But the other option is overlap. And yours may come set to overlap. I'm going to click on OK to save that. Now watch what happens when I take that same transition and add it with that default behavior. Everything to the right of that on the track was compressed because these 2 video frames are now overlapping. The transition looks the same as a result, but it shortens the time period. So if you want to make sure that you don't change the alignment of everything to the right, you don't want to be using overlap. If that doesn't matter, that's fine. But there's a way to change it on the fly as well. You can highlight the transition and then click on the Modify button above the timeline. Here we have overlap, and I can change it back to cross. You notice what happened. The original length of both videos is retained. I go back to overlap, again, they actually do overlap, but it changes my time sequence. So for most cases, I prefer cross. In fact, I'm going to go back to my preferences in my editing and set my default back to cross. Let's look a little bit more at this transition that we have. If you want to change how long the transition occurs, the duration, you simply highlight it, and then you can do it two ways. You can click on the clock, and you'll get this pop-up. You can use the up and down arrows, or you can hover over any of the digits. I'll make it from 2 seconds to 4 seconds, and click on OK, and now it's a longer transition from the one to the other. And in this case, it doesn't change the duration of anything on that timeline. So that's how you can change the duration. Now, in many of the transitions, you have other features that you can change. That's what the Modify button is for when you click on it. When you click on the Modify button, it will tell you what else you can change. We can change from overlap to cross. We also, in this particular one, have a direction. Also, we can change the duration from here on the left, as you note. Let's go from up or down. Let's go right. And then I'm going to watch as I play this. If we play again, now the transition will be toward the right. So that's how you can change and make variations and customize your transitions. If you're working on a transition, you want it to be reset to the factory options, you just click on Reset, and it will change its behavior. That's what that button is for. We can always close that window. So those are some of the things you need to have in mind when you're working with a transition. Let's take another one. Now, if you want to replace a transition, you don't have to delete the first one. You can just take a new one and drop it down, and it will override it. It will not give you two transitions at the same time. It will simply replace it. So now, if I go back here, I have a blur transition, and that's where that one starts and ends. Again, I can go back to the transition. I can click on Modify. I can change the duration. Maybe I only want it 1 second long. And here I have a blur level I can change. I also have a background color I can change. Now this one defaults to black, which is very common. I'm going to click on that. I'll take my colors and I'll move each of these to the other end of the spectrum, or I could type in the numbers on the right, and I'll click on that. I'll close it, and now it will blur from blurring to black but blurring to white. And if I play the transition now, you'll see the difference. And now it blurs to white and then comes back the way we were before. So there are all kinds of variations you can have in the transitions, but I would encourage you to make them simple. Think through what you're going to use, when, and why. One other feature before we go is I'd like to remind you that you can use transitions not only between elements, but at the beginning or end of elements. Let's take the fade, which is one of the most common I use, and put it at the beginning of this clip. Now it's not between clips, it's at the very beginning, but watch what happens when we play it. We have a simple fade in on the clip, though there's nothing adjacent to it. You can also obviously do the same thing on the other end. I can do a fade out from this video, and there we have a fade. Nice little technique. So you can apply them at the beginning or end or between elements in your clips. Those are some of the fundamentals. There's much more to learn about transitions we'll be covering in future tutorials.